There is something missing from a lot of prepper pantries. Something many people try to avoid, but in reality, it's one of the most important elements. Without this key piece of the puzzle, your prepper pantry could crumble under pressure. Does your pantry pass the test? Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Your prepper pantry is the heart of your preparedness plan. Without food and water, nothing else matters. But having food isn't the end of the story. Storing the right foods matters. It matters a lot. And one thing that gets overlooked more than anything else is fat. Fat got a bad rap for a long time. We were told to eat it sparingly, according to that old food pyramid that was sold to us for so long. The same food pyramid that was pushed by lobbyists and big corporations in the business of making money selling cereal grains. Personally, I had already flipped that pyramid myself years ago for my own eating habits. But the point here is fat is not the enemy. It's an important part of our diet and an even more important part of a solid prepper pantry. In this video, I'm going to break down why fats are so important, both from a nutritional standpoint and a prepper standpoint, and also lay out which fats are best to store and why. What do we think of first when we think of prepper pantry foods? Beans and rice, they're always the first go-to. And here's the problem. Look, there is no fat whatsoever in either beans or rice. Our bodies need fat to survive. Fat, it's not just something extra, it's something essential. Your body actually depends on it to function properly. Certain vitamins are fat soluble, meaning that without fat, your body can't absorb those nutrients the way it's supposed to. So you could be eating food, but not actually getting the nutrition out of it. And then you could still end up with a host of problems from deficiencies. Fat also plays a major role in things like hormone production and overall energy balance. And when you're in a stressful situation, which is exactly what an emergency would be, your body relies on that steady, long-lasting energy that fat provides. Without it, you're much more likely to feel drained, hungry, just not functioning at your best at a time when you really need to be 100%. And then there's your brain. Your brain is made up largely of fat, and it needs fat to function clearly. Decision-making, focus, and staying calm under pressure, these are all things that you're going to want in a real-world situation. It's not the time to be running on empty. Now, from a prepper standpoint, this is where it gets really important. Fat is incredibly calorie dense. Gram for gram, fat provides more than double the calories than carbohydrates or protein, which means it's one of the most efficient ways to store a lot of energy in a limited amount of space. And when you add fat to a simple meal like rice or beans, you're not just making it taste better, but you're actually turning it into something that can really sustain you. Of course, not all fat is created equal when it comes to health or long-term storage. Just like the traditional food pyramid, a lot of what we believed about different fats, which fats are healthier, which fats are bad for us, that's all flip-flopped in recent years as well. I can remember years ago when everything out there said that canola oil was the healthiest oil you could use. Boy, has that changed, hasn't it? And on the flip side, a lot of us grew up thinking that butter, lard, and all of those animal-based fats were terrible and they were so unhealthy, we needed to stay away from them. I can remember some of the reactions that I've gotten over the years when I tell people that I use lard in my pie crusts. Not that I really cared about people's reactions, it makes a good pie crust, but things like canola oil and other vegetable oils were considered the heart-healthy options. Over time, that thinking has shifted. We've learned a lot more about different fats. The different types of fats, like saturated fats, mono and polyunsaturated fats, they behave very differently in the body. The saturated fats found in a lot of animal products like butter, lard, and tallow were once blamed for a lot of health problems, but now we know that they're more stable, they're less prone to breaking down, especially when they're heated. And that stability matters a lot, not just for cooking, but it also matters for your health and for long-term storage. On the other hand, a lot of those highly processed vegetable oils and seed oils, things like soybean, corn, canola oil, those are high in polyunsaturated fats. And those fats, they're more delicate. They can break down really easily, especially when they're exposed to heat, light, and air, which can lead to oxidation. And that's not just a shelf life issue. It also affects how those fats behave in your body. It affects it negatively. When they break down, they can form compounds that your body just doesn't handle as well. And that's when you start to hear things like oxidative stress and inflammation. Most people kind of oversimplify that, or they don't fully understand things that they hear, like people tend to do. It is a bit more complicated than just believing that every drop of these oils is automatically bad, but it's one of the reasons that many people are leaning towards more stable fats that hold up better, both in storage and in cooking, and they're moving away from those seed oils in recent years. And then, of course, there's hydrogenated oils, oils that have been chemically altered to make them more shelf stable. This process creates something known as trans fats, which we now know are really, really bad for our health. But the good news here is that trans fats have largely been removed from the food supply today. They've been phased out, not 100%, but mostly. And this does not mean that now all modern oils and fats are now all equal. It just means that one of the worst offenders has basically been taken out. Now, here's the good news and where it all kind of comes together for prepping. Those same fats that tend to be more stable and healthier for our bodies are also often the same ones that are more stable on the shelf as well. This is huge for stockpile rotation and for building a rotating working pantry, which is what we should all be doing. When the same foods, in this case, fats, are best for eating and cooking every day as they are for storing, rotation becomes easy and natural, which is going to lead to less waste and altogether just a higher level of preparedness. It's easier both mentally and financially to stock up when we're stocking up on the same foods that we're also eating on a regular basis. So now that we know why fat is important for our bodies and our prepper pantry and what kind of fats we should choose for our health, let's bring it all together and lay out my list of the top 5 fats for prepper pantry storage. First up is ghee. If you're not familiar with it, ghee is basically clarified butter. It's made by slowly heating the butter and then removing the milk solids and the water, which leaves you with this pure golden fat that's much more shelf stable than regular butter. One of the big advantages of ghee is that it's very stable. It handles heat very well. It stores well. It doesn't go bad nearly as quickly as you might expect. It also remains shelf stable for some time after you open it up, which is important from a prepping standpoint. And it's really, really versatile. You can cook with it. You can add it to meals. You can even just use it to boost your calories if you need it. This is one of those fats that checks almost every box for prepping. You can certainly make ghee yourself, jar it up yourself, or you can purchase it. If you're curious about sources for any of the things that I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to have some links down below to some of my favorite sources. Of course, you can always do a little bit of both, buying and making homemade. If you do make ghee homemade yourself, it's just important to make absolutely sure that you get all moisture and all of those milk solids out and none of them remain so that you're going to have the longest possible shelf life. Under those conditions, perfectly purely processed, ghee can last even longer than the 3 to 5 years that's usually stated. It could last indefinitely. Now, in this same category, for comfort and familiarity's sake, I also store butter powder and some canned butter. Because it hasn't been clarified, canned butter is not going to last as long, and it's not going to last as long after opening if you don't have refrigeration. One thing that will help with this, though, is an old-fashioned butter bell like this. These are designed to sit out at room temperature. They've got a 2-part design, and they use water to seal out air and prevent spoilage while keeping the butter spreadable at room temperature. So this would actually be a great thing to have for a grid down situation. But they're also good to use every day. For that matter, you could even use a butter bell for other fats that remain solid at room temperature, things like lard and tallow and things like that. But if you love real butter like I do, it's probably worth stocking a few cans of real butter. And then I also like to store butter powder. This butter powder has a 15-year shelf life in the unopened can, and more importantly, it remains shelf stable a lot longer after opening. Even though it's a powdered product, it does have fat content. It is made from real butter, and it can add some fat and a rich buttery flavor anywhere that a dry, easily portable version is going to be appropriate. You can blend a little bit of water with it to make it actually a spreadable butter. And the good thing about products like this is that you can make up just as much as you need when you need it, and then you just store the rest dry. You can also use it dry in things like meals in a jar, homemade mixes. I use it in all kinds of baking mixes, sauce mixes, you name it. This butter powder that I've been using is actually on sale right now at like 45% off or more. I'm going to drop a link to that sale down below for you because this is such a basic foundational prepper pantry and food storage item. And I know a lot of you guys are bargain hunters like I am, love snagging a deal. And honestly, with things the way they are today, we need deals like this to make stocking up actually manageable. The next fat on my list is tallow. Tallow is basically rendered beef fat. This is one of the most traditional fats out there, and for good reason. It's extremely stable, it is very calorie dense, and it holds up really well both on the shelf and when you're cooking with it. It's nutrient dense, and it's got a really high smoke point, which means you can cook at really high temperatures without burning it without the oil breaking down like we've talked about earlier. Tallow has been used for generations, not just for food, but for other things like candles and soap, which kind of tells you a lot about how durable it is. It's also a very popular skincare ingredient because it's very nourishing. It most closely matches the natural oils that our skin already produces. So it's extremely biocompatible. It's very easily absorbed. And you know that any Prepper Pantry item with multiple uses automatically gets bonus points in my book. Just like with ghee, you can render and preserve tallow yourself, or you can purchase it. And also like ghee, if you do it yourself, you need to be very careful to clean out all of the impurities, the meat particles, everything like that, because otherwise you're going to end up with kind of an unpleasant product that's not going to have the shelf life that it should. I've rendered tallow before, and honestly, I think it's kind of a pain in the tuchus. So unless I've got a whole lot of beef fat, like all at once from some kind of a preservation project, and I don't want it to go to waste, I don't go out of my way to render tallow myself. I would rather just purchase it. That being said, even if you're the kind of person who doesn't have the time or the inclination to do some of these things yourself, to DIY them, I still think it's valuable to learn the skill, learn the process by at least doing it once, maybe a few times. Remember that skills are an important part of prepping that may serve you well someday in the future. I really believe that. And so even if I might choose not to do something myself most of the time, I still think it's valuable to know how whenever possible. Even with commercial tallow, processing can make a big difference in the purity. So know where your tallow is coming from and how it's processed. I've learned a lot about this over the past few months. So many people I've seen just kind of write off tallow because they've been put off by like the smell of it or something. But if your tallow is processed properly, it shouldn't have an off smell or really much smell at all. We just started getting this tallow that comes from the same ranch where we get our beef delivery every month. And that's awesome because we love the beef. We love the ranch. They never use any kind of hormones or antibiotics. It's a family company and they're very transparent. So we were really happy to find out that we're going to be able to get tallow from them now too. It was really for them about leaning into that idea of using the whole animal and not letting anything go to waste. And we got to see a little bit of what they went through when they decided to market their tallow, and that was very eye-opening. They were looking for a place to process or render their tallow and package it for market, and they discovered there was basically really just one manufacturer that processes pretty much all of the commercial tallow that's out there on the market. So they went to visit the facility, tour it, take a look at it, and they found out that their processes just weren't up to their par. In order to produce the large amounts of tallow rapidly, they're basically overheating the tallow, which is going to cause off colors, flavors, scorching, things like that. So after that, to counteract that, they were actually chemically bleaching the tallow then to make it more presentable to the end consumer. So they said, thanks, but no thanks. And they actually went and developed their own process, built their own facility right on the ranch so they could do it right. And that right there is a huge demonstration of why we buy so many of our products from this company, because they go above and beyond to produce better, healthier products. And it really does show. They have standards that big corporations just don't have nowadays because they're all about profit. The big corporations, you can see the difference with this tallow, both in the looks and the smell. There really isn't any smell. And this whole thing was so eye-opening to me about commercial tallow, what's out there on the market. Just like rendering my own was also equally eye-opening. So now I'm really, really picky about where I get my tallow from. There are so many disturbing secrets hiding in the food industry that we don't necessarily know. So I am always thankful when I get a little bit of insider info that can kind of help me steer my choices. It is scary when you think about it, all the things that we don't know that's going on in the food industry. So next, kind of similar to tallow, there's lard, which is rendered pork fat. So same idea, just a different animal, pigs instead of cows. Lard is very similar to tallow in a lot of ways. It's also traditional, calorie dense, and useful for cooking. It tends to be a little softer and milder in flavor, but it may not be quite as stable as tallow, especially depending on how it's processed. And I can vouch personally that it does not always last as long as some of the other options that I'm talking about today, but it's still a really solid option for food storage, especially if you're rotating through it and actually using it in your cooking. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a favorite of mine for making pie crusts in place of using like butter or shortening. It makes the flakiest pie crust, really. You should try it if you never have. One thing to be aware of, if you go to the regular grocery store or like Walmart for lard, what you find there, it's not always the best choice from a nutritional standpoint. A lot of the shelf-stable lard that you find at stores like this has been hydrogenated and it's got all kinds of yucky additives to extend the shelf life. And that's pretty different from traditional rendered lard. So if you're looking for a more natural option, it is worth checking the label and knowing what you're getting, just like with all of the other products. I'm going to put links down below so you can see a few examples of this. These are just the rendered lard and something like rosemary extract, which is being used as a natural preservative. It works as an antioxidant, so it slows down that oxidation and it helps preserve the fat. It's used in such tiny amounts that it doesn't affect the flavor at all. Using natural preservatives is really different from the synthetic preservatives that we saw in that grocery store lard. Now let's talk about coconut oil, because this is one that kind of gets overlooked nowadays in favor of trendier fats, but it really shouldn't get overlooked. Coconut oil is high in saturated fat, which makes it naturally stable and resistant to going rancid. Rancidity is primarily a problem with unsaturated fats. Coconut oil can last a really long time, even after it's been opened, if it's stored properly. I have personally had jars sitting in my pantry for years that are still completely fine. It's also really versatile. You can cook with it, you can bake with it, you can use it for all kinds of other purposes as well. Coconut oil is often used for skin care, for hair care, natural pet care. It's used for oil pulling for dental care because it's got natural antibacterial properties. And it's also used to make like keto bulletproof coffee, a lot of different things. And one thing I really like about it is it's actually got a little bit of a coconut flavor. So this is one that I will actually eat a small spoonful of, like right straight out of the jar sometimes. It is delicious. So this is definitely one that I like to keep on hand. And finally, we have liquid oils. So my favorites to store of these are olive oil and avocado oil. And these are a little bit different from all the others that I've mentioned because they're not quite as stable long-term, but they are still very important. But liquid oils like these, they're easy to use. They're familiar. They're what most of us use a lot. And they kind of round out your pantry in a really practical way. I rely on liquid oils like these for things like dressings and marinades especially. That's kind of the big difference between these and most of the other fats that I've talked about is at room temperature, they are liquid and pourable versus all of the other fats, the ghee, the butter, the tallow, the lard, they're all going to be solid at room temperature. And as long as you store them properly and rotate through them, they can actually last a lot longer than most people think. I have stored oils for years without really any issues. So while these might not be your kind of set it and forget it fats, they're still a key part of a well-balanced prepper pantry. Okay, so you've heard me say stored properly a lot. So what does that mean when it comes to fats in your prepper pantry? People worry more about fat storage than any other food, like how to store it properly. Proper storage is really pretty similar to most other prepper pantry items. The biggest enemies of oils are going to be heat, light, and air. So the goal is to keep your oils in a cool, dark place and make sure that they're sealed up tightly after each use. And that alone can go a really long way. If you can, for anything that's stored in glass or even clear plastic, go with the darker glass bottles or plastic jars and store them inside of a cabinet where they're not exposed to light all the time. And definitely try not to keep them right next to your stove like a lot of people do because they're going to be constantly getting warmed up, which is not good for them. And then another simple tip is to just avoid opening your large containers over and over again. If you're storing a bigger bottle, it can help to pour a smaller amount into a separate container for your everyday use and keep that main supply sealed most of the time. I really love these little oil bottles. This is what I use. They've got both a spray option, which can spray either a mist or a stream, depending on how quickly you push the little sprayer doohickey button. And they've also got a pour option. And they're just a great size to keep handy in the kitchen. So I just decant my larger bottles into these. And then, of course, there's rotation. You don't have to overcomplicate this. Just use what you store and use the oldest first, and then replace it on the other end as you go. It can help to use a Sharpie to write kind of the date really big and bold on the containers that you're storing. That way you're not struggling to find tiny little expiration printing later on or dealing with dates that have worn off. It just helps you keep things straight. Oils and fats tend to last a lot longer than people think when they're stored properly, so you definitely should not be afraid of storing them. But if despite your best efforts, you should have something go rancid or something just seems off, you don't feel comfortable eating it anymore, definitely don't throw it away. Fats like tallow and lard and even some oils can be used to make simple oil lamps, to make candles. And in a grid down situation, that could be a really valuable backup light source. People have been doing this for generations. And you can also use fats and oils for things like seasoning cast iron, lubricating tools, even making basic soaps like I mentioned before. So learn those skills. These are all traditional uses that go back a long, long time. So When you store fats, you're not just storing calories and nutrition, but you're also storing a multi-purpose resource. And that waste nothing mindset, that is a huge part of what preparedness is really all about. One final note, remember fat can also be naturally present in other prepper pantry foods, and that counts too. Things like canned and freeze-dried meats and cheeses, for example, can be a good source of fats and concentrated calories. And the same goes for fun, familiar options like freeze-dried pizza. Comfort foods are a huge morale booster. There's a reason that the military stockpiles items like this freeze-dried pizza. And we, normal people, don't always have the option to get our hands on these specialty items, but for the next few days, this is available to the public. And I actually have a couple of special coupon codes that you can find at tryfreezedried.com if you want to check these out and take your prepper pantry to the next level. The goal here is to build a well-rounded prepper pantry that can really, truly sustain us during an extended crisis, and not just a collection of random foods that we got off of some list that kind of make us feel like we're prepared, but won't hold up under a real test. There is little that is more dangerous than a false sense of security. I've got resources below if you want to check out any of the things that I showed today, if you're looking for good sources for stocking your pantry, bulk food deals, and all of those storage tools that I showed you today. Check out that sale on butter powder. It is a great time to stock up on that while the price is low. And I'm also going to have a link for you to check out the store and ranch where we get our tallow, and actually so many other products that are made to those same high standards. There is a much better way to shop for basics than by supporting superstores and mega corporations who prioritize profits over the quality and purity of their products and the health and safety of their customers. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a butter emoji down in the comments. And for more common sense tips on building your prepper pantry the right way, check out this video next. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.